Welcome to the Lalulah Podcast, real life conversations about modern sexuality and how to live a happy, healthy, turned on life. I'm your host, Laura Allen, a holistic health coach and founder of Lalulah, an online platform offering natural erotica toys as well as the educational tools you need to expand your pleasure in and outside the bedroom. Welcome to the very first episode of the Lalulah Podcast. I am so excited and I'm so grateful to have you here. I'm your host, Laura Allen. I'm a holistic health coach and the founder of Lalulah, and I am on a big mission to bring healthy sexuality to the wellness table alongside our green smoothies and our yoga pants. My intention with this podcast is to deliver really high value content for free in collaboration with sexologists, practitioners, coaches from all around the world to really help you gain the tools that you need to expand your pleasure in and outside the bedroom. I have personally received so many great insights already from recording this podcast, and I am so excited to share it with you all. So without further ado, let's get started with our first episode. And today we are going to be interviewing Stacey O'Gorman. Stacey is a women's empowerment and intuition coach. She is also a total babe who has been on an incredible journey, and I am continuously inspired by the way that she has held herself so gracefully throughout this entire transition. In this episode, we really deep dive into some of the tools and resources that she's used to help support herself during a time of such adversity. We've also really unpacked what it means with all of this masculine and feminine energy, how Stacey has learnt to balance that within herself and then use it to her advantage in her career, in her relationships, and in her overall life. She's also just a dear friend of mine, and I absolutely love the way that she talks about self-care, self-love, and self-pleasure, and how she truly embodies that in her everyday life. This episode is full of golden nuggets of wisdom, and I hope you get just as much out of it as I did. Let's begin the show. Hey girl.
Hey girl.
I'm so grateful for you being here and being my first podcast interviewee. It's just an honor. I'm always so intrigued and fascinated and wowed by your story because you've been through such an epic journey of discovery and transformation, huge shifts, and to just see how you're kind of holding yourself through that is hugely inspirational. So I'm really looking forward to kind of diving in and getting to know some of the tools that you've used to help you on this journey, and kind of shine a light on some of the discoveries that you've found, because I feel like they'll be really beneficial to a lot of people. Yay.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be your first podcastee or podcast-ess.
Yes. Okay. So my first question is, what color are you today?
Ooh.
And why?
What color am I today and why? I'm feeling into the green vibes.
What kind of green is it? Is it like a block green?
It's like an emerald green. And it's just a general green emerald light that's like just all over my body. There's no particular like emotion associated with it. It's just a vision that I'm getting.
Yum.
Yeah.
Green is a yum color. Yeah. It's like a heart color, right?
Yeah. And also because it's raining outside, and it's like, I just feel like it's been so sunny for the last like couple of weeks, and it's so nice to get the rain on the nature and just let it like feed and grow and nurture. And I think, I'm just surrounded by like your beautiful tropical bush outside your house, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I think all of the green in the world today is going to be really thankful and nourishing. So yummy color.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'll just figure this out. Okay. So what I like to start with in my podcast is, when did your health journey begin? And like, what was the tipping point for you to start to have more awareness about your actions and start to take responsibility for your happiness? Was there sort of like one catalyst moment, or was it a slowly gradual experience, or just what happened for you?
So my health journey properly started probably about 4 years ago. Before that, I was a raging partier. I took lots of various drugs from the age of like 13 up until the age of like 26, 27. And I was living in London for 7 years. I've only recently got back, but I had a business in London, and essentially what happened throughout the kind of trajectory of the business was that it went from being very like fun and creative and fluid to being quite goal orientated and like making cash monies as fast as we could, and really streamlining everything and making everything really uniform. And in that process of getting really serious and bulked down, and like as the business grew, there was like overwhelmingly amounts of emails, and I just noticed, from going from a person that didn't really feel much at all, I suddenly felt myself sinking into this state of like debilitating exhaustion. Like I had crazy hormonal acne all over my neck. I was getting really anxious. Like I would walk to work, and this was just unheard of for me. Like I'd never experienced any kind of lowness in my life, and this was just like it all of a sudden came on maybe 3 years into the business. And my health, my hormonal health, my womanly health started deteriorating really quickly. And it was completely associated with stress, but because I had no body awareness, I was like, what is happening to me? Like completely in this like victim state of like, what's going on? Okay, maybe I need to get laser on my acne to get rid of it. And I need to, like doing quite a lot of seeking external help, going to Western medical doctors, that sort of thing. And then I think one thing just kind of led to another, and I just kind of went from seeing a medical doctor and then talking to someone and then being like, oh, you should go and see my naturopath, or you should go and see my kinesiologist. And at that time, that was like such a far-fetched concept, but I was like, okay, like I'll try it out. And then I just kind of went on this like journey of like starting to do things that were less about the external wellness and more internal, and actually dealing with the stress like head on. So starting to do yoga, starting to do meditation, that led me down the kind of path of getting into like women's focused yoga, and then that led me into the path of actually going to like women's circles and delving into what it is to be a woman, and really embodying that feeling. And then that led me onto a path of kind of exploring my own sexual health. And I just noticed the power of my womb space. So, and like I'd never even associated, I felt numb my entire life in that area. And I remember it was in a psychotherapy session, because I was seeing a psychotherapist once a week at the time, because I was just so low and so anxious. She would take me through these meditations and would always go into my womb space, and this was like a concept that I'd kind of never really gotten into prior to that. And I remember like she would take me there, and then I would feel like physical pain shift just through the meditation, and then uncontrollable like emotion coming out of me, like crazy shit. Like I didn't even know it was like I had that kind of depth within me, but it was just like, honestly, like it was like an exorcism every
Yeah.
time I would go and see her. It was like from that space, and I could physically feel it. So it wasn't like this hippy dippy like crazy bullshit. It was like, this is a physical sensation and it's an emotional embodiment, and I am like releasing this through this amazing practice. And so I was like, wow, there's so much power there.
Yeah.
And
Isn't
so
it amazing?
it's just so
I
epic.
just got like full body goosebumps because it's so, we don't understand how much, I mean, it's just soft tissue, right?
Yeah.
And there's so much, I feel like trauma is a word that is overused and has so much stigma to it, but it could be anything from just, a man giving you the fingers in his car, like in rage one day.
Yeah.
We can store that energetic response in our womb and in that area, that stress and that anxiety and that shame all in there. And once you start to move it, if you haven't done any work in that space before, it can be, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like overpowering and just crazy. And then you realize like actually it's anxiety and it's all of that that's stored there, but it's everything that any kind of tension that you've held on to your whole life, like your dad yelling at you as a child, or a confrontation that you've had with your business partner, and it's just like, if you don't move it, if you don't shift it, it just stores there, and it holds on so tightly, just protecting you. And it's just such a powerful force. Yeah.
Epic. So, I mean, that sounds like a lot. And there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on really briefly. And one was like, you sort of started with yoga and meditation. And then as soon as you started to get a little bit quieter, your essence kind of directed you down the path that you needed to go down. Is that sort of what happened? Yeah.
One really like prominent moment that happened that I will never forget was I'd been like diagnosed by my doctor as having endometriosis. A mild case of it, but that was kind of where I was at. And so I was reading up a lot about it, reading different books, and there was this one book that I started reading, which was called Woman Code. And it was all about healing your womanly issues naturally, so polycystic ovaries, endometriosis.
That's a really good book. I can link to that in the show notes afterwards.
Yes, it's honestly so incredible. And it's just very like scientific and matter of fact as well. But there was a lot of language in there that I'd never even heard of before. So I got to the end of the book. I was in the last chapter, and she actually started talking about what it is to be a woman in this, like in today's society, and what it is to be a woman in business in today's society, and how we're all embodying the masculine, the kind of unhealthy masculine force, which is like the, really like just go, mind focus. Like it's not necessarily unhealthy, sorry. It's just we're embodying that entirely in this society that we're living in. And in order to be a woman in business, it's like we have to kind of embody that in order to be successful and in order to be seen on that level. And we're just naturally doing it because it's like what is kind of like idolized in our society. So
it's what's modeled to us as well.
It's what's modeled to us, and it's like, okay, in order to get ahead, we've got to just go, and we've got to like be no emotion. It's got to be just like
crush it
100-hour
weeks. yeah
exactly. And I was just reading this, and I was reading it, and as she was speaking the words, it was like we've neglected this femininity in the way that we've been like really diving into our masculinity. It's like we've forgotten about the feminine nature, and never even heard of the terms masculine and feminine before. And for me, that was like quite a far out concept. And I was like, as soon as I read the sentence on like in order to get our health back to its like equilibrium, into its like centered state, we need to find a balance of both. And it was like, honestly, like a light bulb moment like I've never had in my entire existence. It was like, I need to follow my feminine flow.
Yeah.
I need to follow my feminine flow. And then I was like, oh my God, I was like looking around, like, did anyone see this? And then I literally walked into work, and I remember I hadn't even spoken to my husband at the time. I walked into work, and I said to both my business partners, I need to have a talk to you. And so we ended up going for a meeting, and I was like, guys, I'm leaving. I need to follow my feminine flow, and we need to like start getting the motions into kind of process because I'm out.
And at that point, everyone's like, okay, Stacey's lost it.
She's lost the plot, but cool. And then, from there, it took like a year to actually get me to be able to exit the company in an appropriate manner, and in order to, be able to sell my shares, and also, just save enough money to go and travel and be fluid and restore my creativity and restore that kind of balance and that fluidity. So that was like the kind of like breaking moment of like something needs to be done. But there was a lot of build up prior to that to kind of, which enabled me to, I guess, understand that concept.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I've got a couple of things coming up that I want to talk about. But first, I feel like we're kind of, it's a good point for me to now go into the masculine and feminine, which is, in our world, something that is talked about all the time. But, for someone who's not used to it, it can be very foreign and very like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So what is your understanding of the masculine and the feminine, and what does that mean for you, and what does it mean for you in your own body?
Okay, so it's actually evolved a lot over this last, like, even couple of months. For me, I think there is, for me, it's like a really like basic terms, I would say the masculine and the feminine is like the yang versus the yin, or the masculine would be like the really goal orientated holding of space, present, like witnesses without judgment, quite driven, just like the kind of like the solid force.
Yeah, quite
grounded. And then the feminine is just this fluid dance. So it's, like not afraid to be wild and free and playful and emotional, and just gliding through life with kind of using your intuition as opposed to the mind, which is I would associate with being the masculine. So almost like the feminine is like the heart led, so like doing whatever is like, like love is drawing you to, and then the masculine is very much like keeping it grounded and making sure it's like, I mean, you can't constantly live in your feminine because you'll just be off the Richter scale and be living in the clouds.
Yeah. So that kind of, that feminine flow is not to be confused with chaos.
Yes. Yes.
And that just goes to prove that we need each other and we need that balance.
Yeah.
Because the harmony is where you can be in your creative flow, be heart-led, and understand and be active in your own flow, but then also incorporate that drive and that purpose and that groundedness to just help direct you and keep you stable.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it can get really messy.
Totally.
So it's an art discovering what is your essence. Like, because masculine and feminine does not mean, I believe, man or woman.
No.
Right? It just, we all have these energies within us, and it's about understanding and identifying each one and figuring out how to use them to your benefit, so that you can stay healthy, radiant, strong, achieve the goals that you want to achieve, and maintain harmony. Yeah. Hustling in harmony.
Hustling in harmony, honey.
That's what it's about, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's almost like having an understanding about what those principles are enables you to be like, okay, I'm going to allow this time in my day to be masculine. I'm going to allow this time in my day to really like explore the feminine. So even in my day-to-day practices now, like I've got a morning practice where I get up, I just dance for like 10 minutes, no matter what mood I'm in. I'm just going to, put on some slow jams or put on some real gangster shit because I want to be like hardcore or like whatever it is. Dance for 10 minutes. Then then I listen to a little 10-minute meditation, and then sometimes I do my like little oracle cards. For me, that's like a beautiful feminine practice, and I'm doing that with like a lot of awareness and a lot of slowness, and I just do it in order to have fun, and then I'll allow time in my day to really get shit done. So set a goal list, like sit down, do some work, do some research, and just making sure that you're allowing a balance of both in your day, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And finding out as well how much of each that you need, right?
Yes.
I know in our modern society, it's expected of us to work 8-hour, 9-hour, 10-hour days, especially if you're starting out a business or if you're a business owner. If you want to be successful, you have to work really hard. But yeah, I'm loving seeing all of this kind of new age, even in the corporate world, 4-day work weeks are coming into fashion big time, which I'm really happy about.
Thank the gods.
Absolutely, thank the gods.
Yeah.
It's just unnecessary. I spoke to my colleagues not so long ago and I asked them, I'm like, honestly, are you guys really productive for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? Like, tell me to my face, like, how much of that time do you spend on Facebook and planning your holidays? Like, let's be real here.
Absolutely.
And so this is also a good point for us to kind of go into how we want to work moving forward with these masculine and feminine energies. Like you touched on it before. You wake up in the morning and you tune in to what it is you need to nourish yourself, and like doing something feminine like that as a woman who identifies as a feminine woman, it's important to connect to that creativity and get into that flow so that you're like nourishing your essence and you're getting the downloads that you need, because when you're truly in your heart flow like that, that's when all of the answers come. That's when you get the magic business ideas.
Exactly.
That's when the good shit happens.
Yeah.
And then, it's about figuring out, okay, when in my day am I most productive, and how long do I need to be productive for? Is that 4 hours, from like kind of 10 till 2, and then do a workout and then maybe some low hanging fruit later and call it a day?
Yeah.
Like we are in a position, I guess you and I are, especially as entrepreneurs now, but I will get to this a bit later about being in the workforce and how you can incorporate, your femininity in a 9-to-5 space as well. But, I do believe that as individuals, we have the power to choose how we want to nourish ourselves and honor our needs to be healthy and happy. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I guess as the kind of creators of our own story, we can really choose, I guess, Yeah.
Absolutely. One thing that came to me as you were saying that was I actually used to do a practice where I would get up and I'd be like, okay, I've got to do an hour of yoga this morning. Like, I've got to do an hour of yoga. And it was like, almost like I dreaded the thought of it, because I was like making myself get on this buzz of like doing an hour of exercise in the morning. And it's like, as soon as I loosened the reins on like what that feminine time looked like for me, it was like, oh, I can have fun with this. Like, it doesn't need to be this like strict, like, I guess masculine, like really structured practice. It can be fun, and it doesn't have to be any longer than like 5-10 minutes in the morning or whatever works for you. But it's like just incorporating that into your day just really allows things to flow and move.
Absolutely. And I think it's just honoring, like tuning into yourself, honoring what you need and what your body wants, especially the first thing in the day. Don't turn your phone on. Yeah. Just tune into you and go, okay, do I want to do some Kundalini and then have a meditation and then do some yoga flow? Or do I just want to journal for 5 minutes? Yeah. Or do I just want to turn my phone on and have a coffee? Like,
Totally.
Like, come on, girl. Yeah. It's like, it's all good,
it's all good. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Be kind to yourself. That is one learning I am slowly adapting and incorporating in my life. But like,
I feel like
it's a tough one.
I feel like that's a lesson I'll be learning for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I don't know know if there's an actual destination with that.
No.
It's just like a constant kind of doing.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about just some of the kind of challenges that you've faced, especially in the beginning of your journey. I find that when people go or are wanting to make some kind of really big changes in their health and lifestyle, but for starters are unsure as to where to start, and then two, there can be a lot of fear around it. I mean, it's scary and it can be lonely. Your relationships change, your job can change, your like continent of residence can change. I mean, you know, like if you really are opening up to some big unknowns. And so what were some of the biggest hurdles that you faced? How did you support yourself through that? And kind of like if there are any key tools that you can think of, that would be awesome to share as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest things for me, and something that I've struggled with my entire existence, is like the fear of judgment. The judgment from like other people around me. So the judgment of like my family or my friends, and that kind of fear of like, oh, okay, what are they going to think of me now? I've decided to like give up my like business that was deemed successful, and like, you know, who will I be without that? And like they're going to think I'm just like quitting or being a dropkick, or like what's she going to do with her life? And like, you know, and there's all these external feelings that I thought, you know, everyone was thinking, but actually I was the only one thinking that. It wasn't anyone else. So I guess honestly that's still a struggle for me. Like I'm getting a lot better at dealing with it just through learning about myself, uncovering like old patterns and kind of seeing them for what they are, as opposed to kind of like holding on to them as things that are like part of my personality, or things that I've kind of held on to as being me, which they are not. And so it's like the more understanding I have around that, through things like learning about myself through yoga or tantra workshops or women's embodiment or dancing or meditating, all of those kinds of practices have really helped me feel more comfortable in my own skin and less kind of looking outside myself for recognition and for acceptance, and have just helped me kind of really become more centered and like really like confident in who I am. So for me that's been a real struggle. Also the kind of, I guess, the pull to kind of get kind of lured back into that old lifestyle that I would lead. So the drugs, the partying, the socializing, like all of that kind of like that life that I knew, that was the only life I knew. So I really struggled with kind of having to say no, and then often just feeling like, oh God, like I'm actually like isolating myself through that process, and it's actually really lonely because I don't know anyone. It felt really lonely because I was like, no one else is experiencing the same kind of transition as me. Like, why I feel so alone, and I just feel like, is there anyone out there that's experiencing the same kind of like process as me, I guess. And I think how I dealt with that, it's just like the more you treat your body with respect and love. So like the more I did the practices and the more I ate healthy and the more I said no, it was almost like my body just naturally, it was easier for my body to say no because I felt like it was slowly building up the health. It's like, I don't know, it's like if you're eating healthy, it's almost like you want to keep going with that because you feel the benefits, the physical benefits of it. Yeah. It's like an intuitive feeling of like, okay, well, I've, you know, like I'm on this roll and this feels good. Like, let's keep going here, you know? Yeah.
It's like an undeniable truth.
Yeah.
You know, it's like once you do really start taking responsibility for your health and for your happiness. And I really resonate with your story. I went through such a similar situation, like being very involved in the party scene, drugs, alcohol, sex, rock and roll, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And then basically overnight just woke up and said, no more, no more.
Yeah.
And I'm on this mission to love myself, whatever the fuck that means. I'm like, self-love?
Yeah.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah.
And I remember messaging my friend just going, I don't care if I need to become the Pope. I will stop at nothing to do this. And, and it was very, I'm not going to lie, it was lonely and it was isolating. But there was one thing that I just knew in my, like, deepest core of my being was that I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And it was lonely in the beginning, but eventually I started to meet more like-minded people and it was just, it was an experiment. I could barely go out without a glass of wine in my hand. And so I would need to really, like, experiment with where I was going. I was like, oh, maybe if I went and saw this, like, jazz band, then that would just be fun and I wouldn't need an alcoholic drink.
Yeah.
And I started doing all this weird sporty stuff and I just was constantly searching for other ways to kind of fulfill myself and find new friends that weren't necessarily in that lifestyle anymore. And it's funny when it comes to, like, alcohol and play, because still now, I'm young, I'm fun, and I like to go out.
Yeah.
Like, I still like to party.
Absolutely, yeah,
and,
me too.
It's just been about kind of finding ways to get that sense of release and, like, loss of inhibition and, like, deep bond and play and fun, which alcohol essentially is an adult permission slip to do that,
totally.
But actually we don't need all of that stuff to reach those states. So it's different for everyone, and it's about finding out how. It's a journey. It's definitely a journey, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
Also, like, I am just personally, like, an absolute extremist with everything in my life. So it's like, if I'll party to the core. If I'm like doing the self-love stuff, I'm like doing it to the core and going to every workshop, and it's like, loosen the reins. You don't need to be so hardcore about everything. Because remembering that maybe you don't need to go out and get lit, but, like, just to be playful and do things that, like, light you up and to not be so serious.
Absolutely.
That's, like, my intention for 2019 is, like, just have a good time.
Yes, girl. I'm right with you on that. Here's to 2019 being a good time.
Shit, yeah.
Oh, I'd love to just say for the listeners, maybe this could be, like, a helpful tool. As I use it a lot. Actually, there's one right here. We can see it. It's like a self-love menu.
So beautiful.
And it changes all the time for me because different things light me up at different parts of my life and blah, blah, blah. But it's literally just about tuning in, doing a meditation, doing what I call a soul storm instead of a brainstorm, and just write down a bunch of stuff that makes you happy and smile and play and feel good and nourish. And that can be, like, all of your classic self-care things, like having a bath or reading a book or group sport, whatever. But it's just about writing those things down, putting it into a menu, and then promising, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but setting the intention to do at least one of those things every single day. And that's what self-love is, right? It's just showing up for yourself and doing what's right for you. And you got a whole menu that you can choose from there. Like a whole menu.
I need to write my menu. Like, I've got it in my head, but I need it. Yeah,
I've got, like, little printouts.
Fabulous.
Yeah, girl, I'll give it to you. So good. Got you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess that's wrapping up. I feel like we could talk forever.
I know.
Forever. We can do another podcast at some stage.
We've not even scratched the surface.
I know we haven't even scratched the surface. And when you go into, like, masculine and feminine embodiment stuff, it really can affect every single part of your life. But I think it's good that we focused on just the kind of business and career side of it now. I feel like before we do sort of wrap up, I do just want to maybe talk about a couple of tools or like even mindsets that we can help some of the listeners embody if they're in just a normal 9 to 5, you know, and they've got no desire or not right now to, you know, run off in a van and live a gypsy life and be in their feminine flow forever. Because
it's not for everyone.
It's not for everyone. But maybe just there's a little bit of it that they can use to help them feel a little bit more in alignment with themselves and just a bit healthier. So we've already talked about kind of setting that time aside to do your like morning routine, whether you're in your feminine or your masculine. And do you have any experience with being in the workplace and still kind of standing up for your femininity, even within a masculine, you know, workforce?
Yes. Well, with my old business in London, we would always allocate like an hour every single day to all sit down and like eat lunch together, completely separate from the business. Like we would never be like sitting at our laptops working. It would be like we all come together. One person a day like cooks the meal for everyone and we all like help out, and then we sat down and just shared like a delicious meal together, and everyone put so much love and energy into it, and it was just like, it was like criteria, and we'd all just put in a little bit of cash in each, and it was just like this collective beautiful experience that we shared every day. I mean, it was like a small bakery space, so there was only like 6 or 7 of us max at a time. So in like a corporate environment, I would say always making sure that you're like going out and you're not working at your desk at your lunch break, and actually go and get some fresh air, or go and sit down and do a 10-minute meditation. I've got this really awesome app that I use called Insight Timer, and there's one woman in particular, Sarah Blondin. She's got a kind of like a podcast, but like they're like 10-minute meditations. They don't take any longer than that. And her meditation podcast is called Live Awake, and honestly it's like magic music to my ears. Like her words are like poetry, and it just takes me outside of my head and instantly into my body, and it's like I'm instantly centered, and so sometimes I don't have time to do that in the morning, so I'll do that maybe before I go to bed, or maybe I'll do it at lunchtime, or maybe I'll, you know, any time in the day when I've got like a spare 10 minutes, I'll just allocate that time and make it a priority.
Making it a priority.
Yeah. And just
we all have the same amount of time in the day.
Yeah.
And it's like, how important is your health and happiness to you?
Yeah.
And you need to make that decision, because constantly hearing that I don't have time sort of excuse coming out, and I'm like, but you do. You do. You just have to prioritize it. If you want it, if there's a will, there's a way, and you will make it happen, and that is up to you.
Totally. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Eating connection, community over lunch, over food, it's such a great way to sort of come back down into your body, especially when you've been behind the computer, the screens. Yes. Going for walks, meditations. Honestly, sometimes my days are so full that I have a little, 3-minute meditation on the toilet.
Yeah, I love it.
But I do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know for myself, another thing that I did recently when I was in my sort of 9 to 5 fintech role, I was the only female in our company, and I planned my sprint cycle around my feminine cycles, and I shared that with the men, and they were nothing but supportive, and this is financial technology, people, okay? Like, no excuses.
Yes.
And they were so open to it and receptive, and, I would plan, my most creative tasks for when I was menstruating, because that's when I could really cocoon and fall into the wormhole for a whole day, and I could put myself in the beanbag room, wrap up in a blanket. My colleagues would even take my dog for walks. That's how supportive they were.
Bless them.
So, I don't think that we need to be scared to assert ourselves in that way. Just because we're women and because we may feel things in a different way to men doesn't mean that we don't work as hard or don't get as much done. It's just we do it in a different way.
Yeah.
And I feel like now's the perfect time to start embodying that and setting an example and educating the masculine as well as other women in the workforce, because we can still get just as much done. We just don't necessarily have to do it in the way that has been modeled to us so far.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, networking events are great when you're ovulating. You know?
Amen.
It's just like, come at me, business cards flying.
Own the room. Yeah, owning the room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Full power. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's nice to know that, you know, and work with that.
I love that.
We don't have to resist, you know, what is completely natural to us. So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Just to wrap it up, I have some quick cues for you. And the first one is, how do you cultivate more pleasure in your life?
I my life is dedicated to pleasure.
Yeah. Amen, sister. Yes.
Literally.
Did you hear that, people? My life is dedicated to pleasure. Yes.
It really is. I spare no expenses. Like, I just, if I want to, like, treat myself, and that I do, I will go for it.
Yeah.
That's with food. That's with taking time for myself to have a bath. That's if I want to go and, like, you know, like, go and have a massage or whatever it is. It's like I'll always allocate that time, whether it's a self-pleasure session. Yeah, I very much do it every day with food. So I'll just like always make that like a really beautiful time for myself, and I'll go hard at it, whether that's like taking myself out or cooking something for myself at home. And also just generally slowing down in my life has made me experience pleasure far more as well. So actually just like taking in the beautiful sights of nature and like just like taking time with friends and like being present with friends. It's like I find so much pleasure in that now because I'm not like up in the clouds and up in my head and like distracted by everything. So
stopping to smell the roses.
Stopping to smell the roses, honey.
Yeah.
It sounds cliche, but
it is damn true. I see a nice flower and I'm just like, oh hey.
I know. Oh my god, I saw a plant.
Hey you.
Yeah. I saw a plant that was like a furry rabbit the other day, and I literally was like stroking it for like 10 minutes, and I was like, okay, I've got to get out of here. It's not appropriate.
I love that. I love that. Own it. And I love how you use food as a celebration of sensuality and pleasure. That is amazing.
Totally.
And you know what? Just being worthy of that. Like, yes, girl. It's like, yeah, I deserve to feel this pleasure. And yeah, like, of course I'm going to take myself out, or I'm going to make this time for myself. Like, I deserve to feel good.
Totally.
So good on you.
Thank you.
I love that.
Thank you. Actually, and one thing I will add to that is that I'm recently separated, so I'm recently single, and it's funny because I've allocated a lot of that time for myself now that I'm by myself, but I will forever keep up this practice. So it's like a learning that I've had that I didn't make enough time for myself when I was in my relationship, and to prioritize that no matter what status you're in.
Yes, amen, sister. I feel like we could do a whole podcast on
Yeah.
that. We will next time.
Yes.
So the next question is, what have you learnt about self-love recently?
Yes. What have I learned about self-love recently? I've mentioned it before, but it's just that kindness and that ease within yourself. So being playful and being like less regimented and less kind of like, I have to allocate this time for self-love because otherwise I'm going to get anxious. It's like, no, just have fun with it. that's just been my biggest learning of the year, I think, or of last year, is that I was just quite a psychotic.
Psychotic self-love.
Yeah, psychotic self-love, and it just wasn't self-love. It was actually just, it wasn't feeding me at all. So just doing things that really fill up my cup and feed my soul, and being playful. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. What is your number one sensual self-care ritual that you are practicing at the moment?
Oof. Okay. So, well, there's a couple.
Number
So
one.
I've mentioned my actual morning practice, which is very sensual. So the dancing, even the meditation, and then the cards, it's a sensual act, I would say, because I'm just very like embodied and like slow and like nurturing with it. And also once I've done it, I just feel like very sensual within myself, like vibrating. But then I also have like a proper like self-pleasure practice, which usually it honestly changes shape and form. There's not one style that I like to go with, but sometimes I will light candles and I'll get out the coconut oil and I'll lay in bed and I'll put a towel down and I will literally massage my entire body from like head to toe and spend like at least like half an hour like massaging my breasts and then going into like a sensual practice of wherever that takes me. So whether that's using my crystal wand or my yoni egg, or whether that's dancing around the room, or, you know, sometimes I'm in the mood for that. Sometimes I'm in the mood to watch porn and get my vibrator out.
Yeah.
And that is another thing that I feel like sometimes there's a place for that. If you're doing it with intention and you're doing it with integrity, then I think, yeah, it depends on where I'm at. Depends if I'm in kind of like a shadowy dark space, or whether I'm in kind of like a light nurturing space, and it's just like making sure that I'm honoring both sides of myself, and that both of them are equally as important as the other.
That's so beautiful. I love that you're so in touch with all of these aspects of yourself and all of those archetypes, and you spend like a good, 20 minutes like opening up your heart space with the breast massage, and then going, okay, do I want to be like in my like slutty dark feminine, or do I just kind of want to, whatever. And that's great.
Yeah.
That's really insightful. Thank you.
Cool.
And my final question is, who is the most inspiring mentor for you at the moment, and why?
There's a few actually, but so I've got this beautiful woman who in London, her name's Yvonne Fuchs, and she was my mentor with Meringue Girls, my old business in London. And she is just, she's been in the game for years. I think she's like 65, and she's just a full power woman. And she is super inspiring. She takes absolutely no shit from anyone, and she just keeps me like, we've got just a really beautiful friendship now, so we'll occasionally Skype. But if I get, as I evolve my kind of business ideas, I'll be talking to her more and more. But it's just good to get a reality check a little bit with her, because, we live in a day and age where like the social media like bonanza has actually just taken over, and people have gotten a bit like, I feel like there's like there's an element of integrity that's been lost within it. And so it's good to talk to someone that's like not even grown up through that phase, but is like, okay, how can we realign, and how can we like do it with integrity and authenticity? And she's also a practicing Buddhist, and she's got a finger on the pulse, but she's also just like very much like, okay, how is this serving humanity essentially? Okay. And then I'm actually at the beginnings of talking to this woman, Kay, from Startup Creative, which is a really awesome platform. She is an Australian-based business mentor, and she is particularly good with working with people in with startup businesses of any shape or form, but also she takes kind of like quite a good grounded spiritual approach as well. So
Awesome.
yeah, and she does a magazine and a podcast as well, which is awesome, and I highly recommend listening to it.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, I'm going to link that in the show notes as well, and the Insight Timer and anything else important that we've mentioned in this podcast that I've now forgotten.
Yes. I've got them all in my head.
Okay, perfect. Wow, that's it. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thanks
you
for
having me.
so much. And if people do want to follow your story or reach out to you in any way, what's the best way for them to find you? Are you open to that? Is there any shameless plugging that you'd like to do?
I mean, you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is stacey.o.gorman. So that's stacey.o.gorman. And you can have a look on my website, which is www.staceyogorman.com. And yeah, I think that's probably all for now. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks, Amelia. If you enjoyed this episode, hit like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to share it with someone who you think could benefit from hearing it too. You can also sign up for Lalulah News and stay up to date with all the juicy content that we only share on email. And I want to take a moment to honor you for following your curiosity and prioritizing your pleasure in this way. And until next time, thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back with another episode soon.